1 second, guys. We're having technical problems. I want to play you something. There we go. Hello and welcome to Kirtan London, Journey for Joy. This is our brand new podcast with your hosts, myself, Madhva Anderson, and we have a co-host, Caitanya Cintamani, but she's having technical issues at the moment. That's why we're delayed joining you here live as well. So my apologies for that. I'm actually not sure if she's going to be able to join us. I hope she is. I hope she's okay. So let's see what happens. But the show must go on. So we are here and we are live. I was just reaching out to another friend to see if they could join me on this, but they can't. So I'm going to try and carry this as best as I can. So despite all the technical things that have been going on behind the scenes, this is our second episode. I'm slightly flustered. That's just the reality. So I'm going to put that out there and let you know. However, luckily, in the bhakti-yoga tradition, we have a beautiful system for starting any spiritual activity. And this system is very, very grounding. On a material level, it's an extremely grounding experience. We normally do what's called an invocation. So any of you who are familiar with Kirtan, who are familiar with bhakti-yoga, you'll know what an invocation is. An invocation is when we chant a prayer or a mantra to our teachers, our gurus, our guides. And it's a prayer where we ask for blessings, we ask for mercy, and we are also offering gratitude for this beautiful process that we've been given of this spiritual path, whether it be Kirtan or the Bhagavad Gita, the wonderful knowledge that's here in the Bhagavad Gita. So I'm going to start with this invocation, and then I'll get into the content of today's episode 2. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shtapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So there should be 2 of us here right now, just so you know. Let me just check one thing. Okay, we will do our best. So, episode 2. For those of you who joined us for episode 1, we are reading Bhagavad Gita as it is. So the first episode that we did 2 weeks ago, we had a look at we explored what is the Bhagavad Gita. So it was like an introduction to the Bhagavad Gita. And we looked at setting the scene. We looked at what's the pre-story to the Bhagavad Gita, where does it come from? So the Bhagavad Gita is a book of wisdom seated within another book. Okay, hold on a minute. Cintamani has arrived.
Hi.
Cintamani, you saved the day.
I'm so sorry. I completely, I thought that we were supposed to start at 7:30. I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine. If anything, I'm happy you're okay, because I was concerned that you may not have been okay.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, that's not good. Okay, here we are anyway.
Well, I feel better now that you're here because you carried the podcast so well last time. So I feel comfortable again. I was trying to carry this by myself, and I think I was doing okay. But
I'm sure you're doing
I'm
fine.
glad you're here. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you.
I'm going to pull up our notes as well.
Yeah, I've got to do that too.
So I already started with the invocation.
Right.
So that's done. It was a very prayerful invocation because I thought I was going to be doing the whole thing alone.
You were praying your heart out.
I was praying my heart out.
I'm so sorry. Oh.
Well, I probably should have been praying for you, but I was praying for myself. But by Krishna's grace, we're both okay.
It's all good.
So I've kind of set the scene on what's happening.
Awesome.
So we've done an invocation. I've explained what we spoke about in episode 1.
Right.
This is episode 2, and it's Arjuna's dilemma. Yeah?
Arjuna's dilemma. Yes.
So I'd like to pass it to you, Cintamani, because I know with both of us going into this, yeah, it is funny. Thanks, Tafrina Dubois. These things happen in life sometimes. Sometimes there's technical difficulties or we make mistakes. And we have to go with the flow and laugh at those things. So it is funny. So, by the way, guys, please feel free, for those of you who are watching us live right now, who are with us live. I can't see you. We don't know who's there, but we can see your comments that come in. So feel free to drop some comments in the comment section, and we can interact like that.
How do I see the comments?
Let me have a look. I'm not sure how to do that, actually.
All right, I'm just going to open...
I'll read them out to you, Cintamani.
I'm just going to open the YouTube on my laptop here.
I'm not sure how to do that, actually.
Okay, okay. Now I should be able to see.
Well, the only problem with that is I can hear myself coming through your computer.
No, I've muted it.
Oh, you've muted it. Oh, okay, nice. Yeah. So...
Okay.
Okay, so we've set the scene. Now, chapter 1 of the Bhagavad Gita, it's called Observing the Armies. Observing the armies. So let's put some context here, what's going on, again, in case people weren't with us for the first episode.
Right.
We have two colossal armies pitted against each other, literally on the verge of starting the battle. There's 640 million soldiers on the battlefield of Kurukshetra waiting to start their fight. So that's where we are, and that's where the Bhagavad Gita takes place. This whole book takes place right in the middle of this pre-battle where the two sides are facing each other. And what happens is one of the soldiers, or one of the warriors, his name is Arjuna. He's on the side of the Pandavas. There are two sides, and there's the Pandava side and there's the Kaurava side. Now, there's context to this.
Good versus bad.
It's like good versus bad. So Arjuna is on the Pandava side. They're the goodies. The Kauravas, they're the baddies. And the Kaurava army almost outnumbers the Pandava army 2-1. So this is a little bit of context as to what's happening. And the Bhagavad Gita is then a conversation between Krishna and Arjuna, where Krishna, who is actually Arjuna's chariot driver, which is a very symbolic thing, which we'll talk about, he goes on to deliver this Bhagavad Gita, this song of God, this wisdom, to help Arjuna come out of his He enters what we might call a dark night of the soul, a depression, confusion, a super confusion. But I feel like I'm already jumping ahead. Cintamani, is there a place, can we rewind and start it from the very beginning? If I pass it over to you.
Yes, we can. So here we are at the very beginning of what is one of the most historic battles of all time. It's basically every warrior on the planet is involved one way or another, and it's just there's two families pitted against each other, and we've got Arjuna, who is a great warrior, the best, and Krishna, who, as we talked about last time, is this divine, wonderful. He's known as Bhagavan, which is he's everything. He's what you would call God or divine, supreme, like this. So they're playing these very, very specific roles. And as we open chapter 1, then Arjuna asked Krishna to drive through the middle of the two armies standing. They're basically ready to go, and he's like, hold up, let's just go through the middle and see who's there, who wants to fight with us. And so Krishna, who kind of knows what's going to happen now, but he just takes him through the two armies anyway. And he's absolutely shocked because on his both sides, Arjuna sees all these people who are his family, friends, loved ones, and he just can't believe that they would want to fight and kill each other, and he doesn't understand his part in it and why he needs to be there, and he just thinks that it would be better to not be there at all. And and so he says to Krishna, like, I don't want to fight, actually. And it's so significant because we come up with these dramas every day in our own lives where we're just like, oh, I can't do it, I don't want to do it, but It's actually our duty to do it. And or we won't even be happy with ourselves unless we've done the thing, but we're frozen and we can't follow through.
Right.
Yeah.
What's interesting for me about chapter 1 is I think for your average person opening the Bhagavad Gita and reading it, I think Arjuna's position makes a lot of sense, and it's a very relatable position. So like you said, Arjuna asks Krishna to drive his chariot to the middle of the battlefield. And he sees his family. That's why he goes into this whole depression, because he sees father-in-laws, he sees his grandfather, his cousins, his teachers, so many of his relatives. And not only his relatives, his very good friends, people who he sees like his sons, because his own sons are fighting in the battle on their side. And then he sees, youth who he considers like his son on the opposing side. So he sees all these people who he loves. And and then he tells Krishna, I can't do this. How? Well, what he actually says, he says a few things. And he says, how am I going to, one of the things he says is, how am I even going to enjoy this world if I kill all of these people in order to simply win a kingdom? Like, what's the point? I'm not even going to be happy. Now, that already is to me, this is already starting to look at one of the key messages of chapter 1 of the Gita. One of Arjuna's initial arguments is, it's not going to make me happy if I do this. He gives more arguments. And all of his arguments sound logical in a sense. And it also feels logical from the perspective of, sometimes I feel like with the Gita, people say, aren't you guys like a peaceful religion? Aren't you guys a peaceful group of people? Isn't it a peaceful philosophy? Why is it set on a battlefield? Like, are you guys into that? Or so it's interesting from that perspective, and it also makes for an interesting discussion. But the battle. So one thing to clarify is we're not like a fighting. We are actually a very peaceful people. But it's interesting to see that this is the dynamic upon which this Gita is being spoken. It's being spoken on a battlefield, like a super intense, crazy fight. And what's being encouraged is that Arjuna should fight. And Krishna goes on to give all the reasons why he should fight, basically. But chapter 1 is setting the scene, and it's giving Arjuna's all of his reasons why he feels they shouldn't fight. It's giving more context to what's happening on the battlefield. We start to see things that are happening on the opposing side as well. And it sets us up for some very, very interesting philosophical points, which I honestly think they really need looking at, and they really need, it's sometimes hard to understand these things at face value straight away. Like, why is Krishna encouraging Arjuna to fight? It seems like that seems illogical. But when you go deeper into it, there's a very profound logic there.
And the author, Prabhupada, he already starts to give the reasons why he should fight. And he talks about duty and how, Arjuna's job was to protect righteousness. And he talks about ultimately it was his sacred duty to fight in this battle because that's what he was born to do, basically. So it's about doing that duty, that thing that makes your soul sing, your work in this lifetime. That's Arjuna's place. So it could, some could say that life is a battlefield. And yes, ultimately, we all have our own personal battles to face. And we stand on the precipice of these things, feeling some fear sometimes. But that's our duty. That's our soul's work. So we have to kind of step into that and get on with it. And that's, I feel in a big way, that's what Bhagavad Gita is about. Like, get on with your duty, get on with your work, and yeah, the fighting, the war, that's Arjuna's specific duty. That doesn't mean that we're all supposed to be fighting wars or that we're all supposed to be super violent or something. That was his work in that lifetime, was to be a warrior. But for us, it could be...
To be a protector as well, because that's what a warrior is, right? A protector.
Mm-hmm. Yes, a protector of the innocent. And effectively, this opposite side, they had exploited innocent people. They had very much kind of ruined their chances of this ever being a peaceful settlement. So it came to this point where ultimately they have to be chastised in a way that they can understand. So that's how they end up.
It's funny. One of the verses in chapter 1 says, when Arjuna is speaking to Krishna, he says, "Take my chariot forward so I can see who has come to fight for the sinful Duryodhana."
Mm-hmm.
Because Duryodhana is kind of he's the protagonist of, he's the main baddie, you could say. And he's the one who really is pushing, has pushed throughout, he pushes throughout the entire story of the Mahabharata, which is the story within the Bhagavad Gita sits. He's the one who's constantly antagonizing the Pandavas and trying to kill them, trying to cheat them, trying to insult them, and in various ways with duplicitous and envious actions. He's the one who's constantly basically causing this enmity and the cause of this battle. He's not the only cause, though. He's not the only cause. In fact, I was listening in a lecture today, because the Bhagavad Gita, the very, very first verse of the Bhagavad Gita, it doesn't start with Krishna or Arjuna or Duryodhana. Who does it start with?
With Sanjay.
Almost.
With
who was Sanjay speaking to? Dhritarashtra uvacha.
Right.
I think I'm right. Yeah, Dhritarashtra uvacha. Yeah. Dhritarashtra. So Dhritarashtra is Duryodhana's father. Mm-hmm. Someone also said Sanjay here in the comments. Now we've had another comment as well from say this for your sake, Cintamani, because I know you can't see them. Or can you see the comments?
I can see.
Okay, thank you, Sidesh. Thank you for your kindness. So the Gita actually starts with Dhritarashtra. So what we're actually hearing is it gets elaborate, it gets intricate. We're listening to a conversation within a conversation.
Yeah, it's Inception. A story inside a story.
It's like, yeah, exactly. It's like Inception. Many of you have seen the movie Inception, a dream inside a dream inside a dream. So anyway, these Vedic texts, they can often be a bit like that. We're hearing a story, and then they start telling a story. So we go into the next story, and then they start telling a story. So we go into the next story, and you can get 5 levels deep. Where am I? Anyway, the Gita is not that confusing. But the first person is Dhritarashtra. He's Duryodhana's father, and he's a blind king. So he's not fighting in this battle because of his blindness. So he's in his palace in Hastinapur, not too far away from the battlefield. And he's speaking to his assistant, his secretary, his personal servant, Sanjay. And Sanjay has a blessing. He's blessed with vision. So he can see the battlefield, even though he's not there present. And so Dhritarashtra is speaking to Sanjay, and he says, "Oh Sanjay, now that my sons and the sons of Pandu have assembled at this place of pilgrimage," because the battlefield where they were was actually a place of pilgrimage. It was a holy place. Now that they've assembled at this place of pilgrimage, ready to fight, what did they do? So this is the opening verse of the Gita, which is also relevant. And so you know how I was saying Duryodhana is the one who's always he's the instigator constantly. So Duryodhana is a representative of what we see as material action. He's always acting. He's always doing envious, evil things constantly. But Dhritarashtra is considered to be material motivation, because he has the same desires as Duryodhana. He wants the same thing, but he doesn't openly or outwardly act in the same way as Duryodhana. In fact, outwardly, he's constantly so-called lamenting about Duryodhana's actions. But inwardly, he feels the same way. So he's considered to be the representative of material motivation. And Duryodhana is considered to be the representative of material action. So that motivation in action, which is interesting.
Yeah, it's all it all has its symbolic ways of it's very teachable. And I find it so interesting, because when you read chapter 1, you can see that everyone knew how it was going to turn out in the end. Like Duryodhana, Dhritarashtra, they all knew that they're gonna lose. They try to bolster themselves up and use bravado, and they're like, oh yeah, we've got this guy, we've got that guy, and they're so great. We've got Bhishma, we've got we got all these amazing warriors and we're the best and da 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 da, but they just know that Krishna is on the other side and he just outweighs everything that they have going for them. And they're also like really, really, their drive to just do the wrong thing no matter what. It's like, it's symbolic of everyone's kind of desire to do good things, but then ultimately sometimes it's hard to do the right thing for yourself. And it shows in a big way for them. Like for myself, it's like small decisions, like I'll wake up in the morning and I should decide like what shall I eat for breakfast, and it could be something super healthy or it could be like ice cream. I don't eat ice cream for breakfast, just in
Oh yeah. Now we know, Cintamani. Now we know.
But like to act in our own what was that term you used?
Enlightened self-interest.
Right, enlightened self-interest. To act in a way that's good for your body and your soul and your mind. These things are so can be quite difficult to do sometimes, to make those good choices. And sometimes it's a minor thing, like, oh, you eat pancakes for breakfast and then you have a carb coma for the rest of the day. But then other times it's like, you're on a battlefield and you've tormented innocent people and now you're going to die for it. Like it's so
I love that comparison.
It's all relative, you see.
It's relative.
So that's what I saw when I read it. I was like, oh, these people don't know what's good for them, but ultimately,
you're talking about Duryodhana and the Kauravas.
The Kauravas, yeah, they don't know what's good for them. They're just like, they still insist on doing the wrong thing, no matter what.
Yeah, I just want to reply to Tarkesh as well. Tarkesh has asked us, are we going to do a whole chapter live? And the answer to that is, well, we're going to try. Because I feel like there's so much here that can be juiced out of just chapter 1. There's so much. So
but we will be back every 2 weeks. So
we'll be back every 2 weeks. Yeah, I mean, this is the idea is we do a chapter per episode, and it's every 2 weeks. But it's not necessarily strictly the case. What we may find sometimes is we may not finish, or we may feel like there was so much more in this chapter that we just have to do it again. So, but we are going to try and get through the entire chapter, at least pulling out the key parts of it. So, we'll do our best to do it justice. But there is so much, and I'm actually concerned. I'm like, so many things we have to talk about in chapter 1. It's so let's see how we get on, because at the same time, we don't want to do an injustice to ourselves and to the viewers as well. But that's really nice, and I agree with you. And what's interesting, you're saying this about the Kauravas, that they don't know what's good for them. But this was kind of the point that I was touching on earlier about Arjuna. In this scenario, in chapter 1, what we see is all of a sudden, Arjuna falls into that same space where he no longer knows what's good for him. He's now lost sight of his own enlightened self-interest. And he's still thinking about his own interest, because let's be real, that's what we all think about. And actually, this is the cause of our problems, when we're simply thinking about our own self-interest. Thank you, Ananda. Your encouraging words always warm my heart and encourage me greatly. So Arjuna has fallen into this same space, where now Arjuna has lost sight of his enlightened self-interest. One thing to note here is that Arjuna is not an ordinary soul. Arjuna is an enlightened person in reality. And what's happening here is it's almost like a drama. So Krishna is confounding Arjuna for the purpose of being able to speak the Bhagavad Gita for our benefit, for everyone's benefit. But in the context of this dramatic playing out, Arjuna's exhibiting the same illusion that the Kauravas are under. And essentially what that illusion is, he's only thinking about his own happiness. And when we're in that space, we're not thinking in an enlightened self-interest. We're not thinking in a way that's enlightened self-interest. It's self-interest in ignorance. And so Krishna goes on to explain this to Arjuna, and that kind of comes in chapter 2. In chapter 1, Krishna's not started speaking yet. It's just Arjuna fully like emptying his heart. He's just like almost crying to Krishna that, how can I do this? How can I fight? I won't be happy. If we kill all of these people, then irreligion will spread across the world, because so many of all the men of the family will die, and then unscrupulous men out in the world will then, abuse the women, and there'll be unwanted children will take birth, and then the world will become irreligious. So he not only is he saying like, how will I be happy if they all die? And then that's actually the key. And that's how I see it, at least. Like, that's where you see he slips the truth of his emotion in that moment. He's actually just thinking about his own happiness, but he also gives so-called righteous reasons. How can I kill my seniors? How can I kill my teachers? So, and this is also interesting. When we want something for ourselves, we'll say anything to get what we want.
To rationalize.
To rationalize how we think. And what Krishna goes on to try and explain to Arjuna is, you're thinking about this all wrong. You're thinking about this from a material perspective. And when you're thinking about something from a material perspective, the nature of that mentality is it does not result in happiness. That's the nature of thinking in that mentality. That's the law of nature when we think in that mentality. And he goes on to try and explain to Arjuna that you want to be thinking, how can I please the divine? And that's what you said this earlier. You said this word duty. You're like, God, we just have to get on with our duty. And so that's kind of my question to that has been in the past when I've heard that. Well, what is my duty? What does that mean? And this is what Krishna goes on to explain, that our duty is to act in a way where we're no longer just thinking about our own self-interest, but we're thinking about, how are my actions right now going to please the divine, or going to please, I'm just going to say God. I know that's maybe a taboo word for some people, but it's a word I've grown up with and I'm very comfortable with. So forgive me if you are not comfortable with that word, please. But yeah, so he's thinking, but that's kind of also the premise of the Gita. At the end of the day, it's telling us that actually, if you want to be happy, you need to think about, how can I please God? Because that is what's going to make you happy. And if you're thinking, how can I make myself happy? That's ignorant self-interest. And it's very likely that you will end up unhappy.
Right.
So it's interesting, there's a nice analogy on this point. This analogy is not in the Gita itself, but this is just a beautiful description of this point I was just saying, which is that, imagine a tree. So if you want to nourish the tree, if I want to nourish the tree and I start watering all the leaves, am I going to nourish the tree?
Nope.
Cintamani knows this example. She's right there with me. She's like,
the tree will die.
You're not. So if I try to water the branches, am I going to be happy? Is the tree going to be nourished? No, it's obviously not. The way that we nourish the entire tree, so the trunk, the branches, and each and every leaf on that tree, is when we water the roots. Yeah, so that makes sense. So in a similar way, when we're only thinking about our own self-interest, it's like us trying to water the leaves of the tree. We're actually getting nowhere. But when we realize, in order for me to feel nourished from within, because happiness comes from within, I think that's something that a lot of people forget. We look outward. We're constantly thinking that, in fact, in today's day and age, there are two primary things that people think are going to make them happy. And it's wealth and fame. But what's interesting is neither of those things make us happy. And this is what Krishna is trying to explain. Not just wealth and fame, but nothing material, whether it's wealth, fame, family, friends, whatever it is, none of these things truly nourish us on the deepest level. What truly nourishes us is when we realize we have to water the root, and the root is compared to God. When we act in a way that pleases the divine, then naturally all the leaves and the branches and the rest of the tree becomes nourished. So that's how Krishna will go on to start to encourage Arjuna in this enlightened way of thinking.
Yeah, so we have a lot to look forward to in terms of getting all this, what is it that they keep putting in the video? Juicy wisdom bites from the...
It's funny. When we made that intro video, I almost said that. Not randomly, but it was spontaneous, and it's turned out to be one of our juiciest marketing strategies, phrases.
It's our whole thing now. It's juicy wisdom from the Gita.
So I'm going to pass it over to you, Cintamani, because, by the way, for those listening, Cintamani is amazing at structuring things and knowing how to she, for the first podcast, if you listen to that, you hear me constantly saying, so what are we talking about next, Cintamani? Because she just had it so well planned out. She knew what all the points were that we wanted to raise. So again, Cintamani has done a fantastic job of things that we kind of wanted to bring out of chapter 1. So I'm going to pass it to you and see if there's any of these points that you'd like to bring out and touch on.
Thank you, Madhva. I really think it would be nice to talk about one of the key points right at the beginning, where everyone blows their conch shells. And, someone says, just eat wisdom. Okay. But...
Oh, it might come in late here.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, I see it. Just eat wisdom. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Frina. I'm gonna show that one.
I feel like that should be on a T-shirt or something. It's deep. It's got layers. I like it.
You say it's got layers. It's the worst example. It makes me think of an onion.
Onions have layers. Ogres have layers. Is that why?
Yeah, onions have layers. Did you say what else has layers?
Ogres. Is that
ogres?
the quote? Isn't that the quote from Shrek or something?
Yeah, from Shrek. That's true. Yeah.
Sorry, I digress.
Wow, I haven't seen that in a long time. Thank you to Frina.
Thank you. So, back to chapter 1. So, yeah, we've got
conch shells.
Conch shells. So basically, a conch shell, if you don't know, it's like a big seashell. And the warriors of those times, they each had a conch shell, and each conch shell had like a special sound. And they would blow these at the beginning of the battle to kind of, it's like a war cry almost, where they were just like, they were announcing the beginning of the war. So they've got these, every person has a conch shell, and when they blow into it, it's almost like a boo, like it's really like. But I'm doing a bad impression, obviously. But it's
that was good. How does it sound?
Are you gonna make me do it again?
Okay, you don't have to do it again. But that was a good first go, though.
Oh, boo.
That's impressive. Felt like I was on the battlefield.
Oh, thank you. That was my best shot. Anyway, so you get these conch shells, and it's described that this sound shatters the hearts of the opposite side, and I find it so interesting because the sound vibration that they had back then was so powerful that it was able to physically harm the opposite team. And I thought it would be nice to get into a discussion about sound and how these kind of sounds affect us. Like back in the day, they had all these weapons attacking the other side that were so subtle. It was just on the sound level. You know, it could harm you in your just by hearing it. You feel disturbed, you feel pain, you feel broken. And nowadays we think that sound doesn't affect us, but it still does, you know. And we may not get attacked by divine weapons, and we might not hear war conch shells, but for example, if you go into a shop at Christmas time, you get attacked by Christmas songs. And then, like,
well, that's what I think many people would agree with you. That's how they feel. We get attacked by Christmas songs.
Yeah, but this music is there to make you do something, right? To make you buy presents for Christmas or whatever it is. But there's also other, you know, we have to be so careful what kind of sound we put into our own systems, in terms of, you know, music that makes us feel sad, music that makes us feel angry, you know, unkind words. All these things affect us on a level that we can't see, actually. And yeah, nowadays it's very, very important. The more that, you know, companies and you know, these kind of manipulators of human emotion, the more that they learn how to use sound against regular people, the more strong that we have to be when we're out and about. And also we have to listen to more kirtan.
This is such a nice point, Cintamani. Such a nice point. I just want to touch as well, in the Gita, it does talk about when their conch shells were, they had names. They were such relevant items that they would name their conch shells. So Krishna's conch shell was called the Panchajanya, and Arjuna's conch shell was called the Devadatta.
Most famous. Yeah.
Yeah, and it does say that when they blew their conch shells, it broke the hearts of the Kauravas. And what's funny is, before Krishna and Arjuna blow their conch shells, the Kauravas blow their conch shells. So we hear that. We hear that the Kauravas start by blowing their conch shells. And it doesn't really have any effect. All it does is it causes the Pandavas to be like, okay, we gonna blow our conch shells too then. But when the Pandavas blow their conch shells, it breaks the hearts of the Kauravas. And it's funny because there are lots of small indications in this chapter 1 of the Gita that already foretell that the Kauravas will lose the battle and that the Pandavas will win. And there's various indications here, but this is one of them. This is one of them. The fact that when the Kauravas blew their conch shells, it did nothing to affect the Pandavas. But when the Pandavas blew theirs, some of them dropped their weapons. Some of them fell off their horses. They were so stunned and terrified.
Yeah,
they just fell to the ground. You know,
they just know that they're doomed. They know it.
Yeah, exactly. They could hear it. They could feel it. We're doomed. Yeah. And Arjuna knew they were doomed. That's why he didn't want to fight, because he thought, these guys are dead. Everyone who I'm seeing here is dead. Yeah. I know it. I just know we're going to win. And anyway, that's another point. But Sound vibration is so important. And have you ever seen, there's a really, really incredible video on YouTube of someone playing different sound vibration frequencies into a metal sheet with sand on top of it. It's incredible.
Oh, I have not.
It's incredible because this video is one of those videos that if it's the first time you've ever seen it and you know nothing about sound, it will blow your mind. Because what happens is they're playing sound vibration into this metal sheet, and each frequency creates different mandala shapes in the sand. The sand forms shapes on top of the metal plate that are being caused by the sound frequencies. And as they increase the frequencies, the shapes and patterns of the sand on this plate become more and more intricate, and they're constantly changing and constantly vibrating. And so what we see is that sound frequency, it's so, if you know how and you know how to access it and how to see it, it's so tangible and it's so real. And they do the same thing on water. If you freeze water crystals after having played different sound frequencies into it, it will take different formations. It will take different, each ice particle will look different. And when beautiful music is played into it, for example, it takes beautiful, almost mandala type formations in the ice you see in the crystals. And if you play really heavy, dark, let's say, grunge, dark metal music into it, it's very like disjointed shapes that it creates. And our body is made of water. It's sacred geometry, yeah. Chaldean plates. Yeah. I didn't know that that's what they're called. Chaldean. Yeah. So, and I'm so into this stuff. You've literally picked a subject that I'm so into because of Kirtan. It helps us understand the relevance of Kirtan. Because Kirtan or mantra is sacred sound vibration.
It's pure. It's completely pure. And not only is it pure, but it has a purifying effect. When you look into it, it cleans the whole atmosphere. It cleans your consciousness. It cleans everything, that it touches, basically.
Yeah. And it's with Kirtan, it's also extremely fun, which is a bonus. But that's actually not the best thing about it. There's so purifying, like you said. And we have to be careful about what sound we let into our system in that sense. Did you know that this is a real digression here, but this is for the conspiracy theorists out there, that there was at some point in history, music was changed from one frequency to another. So all the instruments that we see in the world, they're tuned to a certain frequency, which I think is 440. But that's a disjointed frequency. Prior to that, all music was in 432 frequency, which is a harmonious frequency for the human body. So there's actually there's like a cult of people who are into 432 music frequency, and they'll retune all their instruments and things like that, and they'll play in 432, which is a harmonious frequency for the energy of the body. But there's a really nice point, Cintamani. I think that was interesting. I actually hadn't even, although I'm into frequency, I actually hadn't picked up on that nuance coming from the conch shells in the Gita.
Yeah, it's I found a video not so long ago, and I've lost it since then, but there was this amazing video of this guy, and he was like a concert conch player. Yeah. So he had, he was playing conch in the orchestra, and then he had like so many conches at different frequencies, and he was blowing them for the camera so that we could hear every different sound, and it was really quite powerful. Like he had these like huge pink ones and these little small white ones, and it was just like it blew my mind really, because I didn't know that you could get so musical with a conch. Like I blow conches a lot, but I didn't know that you could like make music out of it. Yeah, but it's such a powerful thing, and it can rise the spirits or it can crush your spirits.
Right.
Sound.
Yeah. We've got a few comments coming in here. And Tafrina is a sound therapist. Actually, I was going to say that as well. Tafrina, sorry, she was just confirming that it is 432, which is the frequency, which is the harmonious frequency. She's saying she uses them in her singing bowls. They do sound bath or sound therapy.
Yeah.
Which is, it's interesting because I feel like that's the kind of thing that your common average Joe might just dismiss as it's just rubbish. But it's so not. It's so true when you dive into the science of it, when you actually look at it properly. There's so much relevance there. And I feel like that with so much about life. I really feel like as a society, we're trained to be shallow. You know what I mean? We're trained to be surface dwellers. We never go deep. We never look at anything deeply.
Well, explain more.
I mean, what I mean by that is I look at myself and I see, because I feel like a child of two worlds. So I was born and raised in this culture of bhakti. And so from a young age, I've been, I've had spiritual messages, and I've been exposed to what you might consider non-conventional ways of thinking. But I've also always gone to, normal schools or non-bhakti schools. So, and then I worked in the world. So I've always had jobs. I've always worked with people who are not into this kind of thing. A lot of, just out in the world. I worked at Heathrow Airport for a number of years. I was a firefighter for a number of years. Prior to that, I was in college. I was in high school, all of that kind of stuff. And so I also have that influence in me, and I could see how my friends thought, and I could see how my mind started to feel in certain environments. And I always felt like people often don't go deep, and we don't ask deep questions. And we often, if something is not in our realm of interest, we'll just dismiss it, especially if it seems strange to us based on our cultural upbringing. And so we're not really into finer arts in the Western world, things like sound therapy. Sorry, this is all just coming from the sound therapy thing, which is obviously a bit of a digression. But anyway, I still think it's an interesting point that, because I could see myself, even though I was raised with this spiritual culture, with this knowledge, there's so much under the surface if you just ask the right questions and are willing to look a little deeper. Even me, I remember a previous me would have said, sound therapy, well, it's rubbish. But the more you look into it, there's so much truth. There's so much depth. You just have to open your eyes and be willing to go a little and ask the right questions.
Yeah.
That's what I meant by that. Sorry, apologies for my digression.
No, I think you're right on track, and I think that if it's hard for you to understand that sound affects you, just consider for a moment, how you felt when you were listening to a sad song versus how you felt when you were listening to a happy song. Like, it's the most basic way that sound can affect you when you listen to Adele versus listening to, I don't know, a happy person. Or happy music, a happy song. Like the feeling is there right away. The effect is there right away. It's very tangible. And the more and more subtle it gets, the more and more it can affect you in different ways. It's quite, well, the more you look into it, even though it's quite, to me, it seems quite elementary, but yeah, it does affect you in a big way. And it's true that people do dismiss these things quite quickly. As you said, I totally agree. And Tafrina says the digression is beautiful.
Yes, it's good. You get the you get the comments coming in a second before I do, because I'm actually on the StreamYard website, so it comes through slightly slow for me. Thank you. I've got it now. Thank you, Tafrina. Beautiful digression. Yes, it was a good digression. Okay. So I don't know if you wanted to talk about, I feel like we've really, there's more that we could say about sound, but I think we've flushed that out nicely, I feel.
Yeah, I think that's enough. Have you got your notes in front of you? Because I don't actually.
Well, I do. I have your notes, and I also have some notes that I made. Let me just have a look at your notes to see what you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things you said, Arjuna's fear and the cause described in detail. You were talking about modern day depression and anxiety, and in these times we've been afraid. Is that ringing any bells for you? What you wanted to talk about?
I feel like we've covered that more or less.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've got one note here that I've read the chapter 1 of the Gita a number of times, but nonetheless, when you're about to do a podcast on a subject, I have to go research it again. So today, I was listening to some different lectures from very wonderful teachers and speakers, and one of them, his name is Sutapa Prabhu.
Right, Sutapa.
He's a monk. Actually, he's a monk here in England. He lives at the Bhaktivedanta Manor, which is a big temple in Watford. Beautiful place. If you've never been, I highly recommend it when we are allowed to go again. So he was giving a summary to chapter 1 on YouTube, and he made some really beautiful points, things that I'd never heard before. And one of the things he was saying is that so Arjuna is now exhibiting this, this like loss of equilibrium. He loses his mind, and he enters into this, state of complete confusion, and he's lost. And so he's in this really difficult situation, and he was comparing that very, very difficult situation to like someone who's asleep and their alarm clock going off. And he says there are different ways that we respond. He goes, there are different types of people who respond differently to their alarm clocks. So you've got the person who their alarm clock's going off at whatever time in the morning, and they just completely ignore it. There's those people that can ignore it, and if you've got thin walls in your house, you might hear someone else's alarm going off and it just goes off.
It used to be every day. Oh man. I used to hear the neighbor's alarm clock going off every day.
I swear to God, I can hear my neighbor's alarm clock sometimes. I hear the vibration.
Like, I feel really bad about this, but one day I got so fed up because I decided to sleep in, and his alarm clock goes off at like 6 a.m. every day. And I actually stuck my head out the window and I yelled because I was like so tired of it. Because like he snoozes it for like half an hour. And I was like, anyway, sorry, I'm off topic, but yeah, I know this feeling so much. Please.
No, it's funny. It's funny. There are those people. Actually, I can be that person. Sometimes I set my alarm too quiet. I'm like, I don't want it to shock me. I don't want it to shock me in the morning, so I'll just set it a little quieter. And if it's too quiet, I can just sleep straight through. It's annoying, but not annoying enough that I'll get up and turn it off. So anyway, there are those people who can sleep through their alarm clock. They just ignore it. And then there are those people who might wake up briefly, and what they'll do is they'll go to their phone and they'll either just turn it off or they'll hit snooze and then they go back to bed. That was me this morning. I failed hard. I try to wake up early these days. I do try to wake up early. I like to wake up early and do my meditation practice first thing in the morning. It's beautiful. It's so beautiful when I'm able to do that. However, today was a fail. So I did exactly that. I woke up. I got out of bed because I placed my phone away from the bed so that I have to get up. I placed it at the other side of the room. So I got up And I was like, I could go to the bathroom and get ready now, or I could snooze it and go back to bed. But you know what? Snooze, I don't know about anyone else, but for me, snooze means game over. There's, I just, a
Once
mental
you turn
change.
it off, that's it.
Yeah, no, I'll just snooze and snooze and snooze. Once I'm in that mindset, I can't get up. So anyway, I did that today. So then there's the people who, they wake up briefly, but then they go back to sleep. And then you've got the people who, when they hear their alarm, they'll get up and they'll go get ready. They'll wake up and they'll stay awake. And so the comparison is made here to us, or to Arjuna, when we're experiencing very, very difficult, challenging moments in our lives. These are alarm clocks. They're opportunities for us to wake up. Most people ignore them. We ignore these opportunities where we're presented with extremely difficult situations that are painful, challenging, traumatizing, and we don't approach them head on. We ignore them. And that's like the person who just sleeps through their alarm. Then there are people who might wake up briefly. The situation is so traumatizing that it forces them to wake up and start to look a little deeper. But as soon as things calm down just a little bit, then we go back to sleep and we stop pursuing that being awake, you know? So that's, I feel like I'm kind of that person many times, you know. I feel like I've many times in my life, I've fallen into that category. But then there's the third person, and Arjuna perfectly represents the third person, the person who wakes up and stays awake. But it takes the course of the Gita for Arjuna to wake up. Actually, from what I've heard, I think the Gita was, because it's just a conversation, I think it was spoken over about 45 minutes to an hour between Krishna and Arjuna. So although it could take us a lifetime now to study the Gita, Arjuna heard and understood the Gita in 45 minutes. And after that, his doubts were dispelled, and he woke up to the reality of his situation. So I thought it was a really, really beautiful analogy.
It's spot on. It's absolutely spot on. Yeah. Time to wake up.
Jeev Jago. There's lots of beautiful songs in the Vedic tradition, in the Vedic culture, that speak about deep spiritual topics. And there's a really nice song, Jeev Jago. A few people have sung that, Gauravani and Jana, that I'm aware of. So something else here that I can see on Cintamani's points that we kind of wanted to talk about. I think we still have a little bit of time. We've been going for just about an hour, but I think there's a little time. We should keep going for a little longer. You were saying you would like to talk about the meaning of these two names that come up a lot in the Gita.
Right. So Krishna, Arjuna, when he's finished giving Krishna all his reasons why he shouldn't fight, he very famously puts his bow down, which is his famous weapon of choice, and he sits down and he just says, Govinda, I will not fight.
I'm just going to call out to Freena very quickly. The world to see. Thanks for sharing that with us. It's not just me.
You're not alone.
Sorry, Cintamani, please continue.
So he says, Govinda, I will not fight. And it's such a beautiful thing, actually. He just decides, you know, he's thought it all out. He's, you know, absolutely shaking. He's distressed, and he just he says, oh, Govinda, I will not fight. Govinda is another name for Krishna that we use a lot in Kirtan. And it's has many, many meanings, actually, but the key meaning here is that Govinda is the one who gives peace and pleasure to all of the senses. And why is that important? Because Arjuna was kind of appealing to Krishna to please find a way for all my senses to be satisfied in this in the outcome of this dilemma. And Krishna, Prabhupada in the purport, he makes this. He kind of calls out Arjuna, and he's like, Govinda is not there for you to please your senses. It's the other way around, actually. Like, we're supposed to be thinking about how to please Govinda's senses. And in that way, that's how we become satisfied. Yes, so Govinda is one important name. And then the other name that he calls him, it's so funny, actually, because he chooses his words so carefully. Every word means something very significant. So he uses this other name, Madhva, that we also use a lot, Jayarada Madhva, like that. So Madhva meaning he who brings good fortune. So he's saying to Krishna, oh, you're supposed to bring me good fortune, but you want me to fight this battle which is only going to give, bad luck, bad misfortune. Yeah, and again, Krishna's the point is that Krishna always gives good fortune, no matter what. It's a no-brainer. So Arjuna is so wrong in these two circumstances, but he calls these beautiful names of Krishna, and yeah, we use them quite often, don't we, in our mantra meditation? You might have heard them before.
That's beautiful. I love those. I also love how Prabhupada, the author of the book, he just calls stuff out. Calling Arjuna out, he's like, no, this is not right. It's wrong.
Yeah.
There was actually something. There was another. So I recently heard something that really struck me. It really struck me as being so beautiful. And it was in relation to Arjuna in this first chapter of the Gita. Now, some of you may have heard this term before, but it's sometimes referred to that Arjuna was having a dark night of the soul. Have you heard that before, Cintamani?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And there's actually a book called The Dark Night of the Soul by an incredibly wonderful author. His name is Simon Haas. He's another bhakti practitioner. And so his book, he's got a few books out, but one of his books is called The Dark Night of the Soul. And it's kind of a commentary on the Bhagavad Gita as well. But it's kind of elaborating in more detail, trying to help us understand the Gita better. And he's explaining how in this chapter 1, what we're seeing Arjuna go through a dark night of the soul. He's depressed, he's confused, he's bewildered. He's so lost that his body is exhibiting physical symptoms. He's shaking, he's sweating, he drops his bow, he falls to the ground. And so these are all symptoms of a dark night of the soul. And Arjuna really is supposed to be representative of us. And we all go through at some point in our life these dark nights of the soul, and very likely we'll probably go through more than one in our lifetime. That's why we hear things like midlife crisis. I feel like my teenage years were one long dark night of the soul. So actually, I was a very happy teenager in one sense, but in another sense, they were challenging years. I think it's challenging being a teenager, just all these weird emotions and hormones going through you. Anyway, in our culture, in today's day and age, This is one of the points that Simon makes. He says, in our culture, if someone is experiencing a dark night of the soul, we almost stigmatize that person.
Mm-hmm.
We shun that thing. We don't like to see darkness. And so if someone's struggling, especially if someone is seriously struggling, Sundari loves that book too.
Sundari.
Sundari actually, Sundari's my wife, by the way. So this is why I know this about her. But she missed a flight because she was reading that book. She was at the airport, and anyway, I can't remember exactly how it happened, but she missed a flight because she was so engrossed in this book.
Wow.
Dark Night of the Soul. Sorry, Sundari, you out there, but that's just to say how good that book is.
I think that's like the best testament for a book.
It is.
Gonna have to go and find that.
Isn't it? I missed my flight because I was so engrossed in your book. But you see, we shun that, and we don't respect it. And if anything, we stigmatize it. People who are struggling mentally, perhaps they might even go on medication. We might even call them, call them crazy, put them on medication, or we just label them as depressed, and then they have to take tablets to try and just like neutralize their depression. So it becomes a very stigmatized thing. And if someone's really going through a tough time, maybe their friends might abandon them, maybe their family might abandon them, they're too difficult, it's too challenging. It's not something that we respect in modern Western society. But in previous cultures, when someone went through a dark night of the soul, this was almost considered a rite of passage. These moments were understood. It was understood that these moments in our lives were the critical junctures that could lead us higher if we approach them properly. And therefore, they were respected as sacred. And if a person was struggling in one of these dark nights of the soul, they weren't ostracized or they weren't stigmatized, but they were supported and they were loved and they were guided. And that's the role that Krishna takes for Arjuna now. He guides Arjuna through this experience. And I tell you what's interesting is I actually feel, I joked about my teenage years earlier, but I feel like I went through a dark night of the soul last year. Possibly the first one of this life where I was really, really, really in a dark space. And it wasn't even to do with COVID, because last year was a challenging year for most of us, I think.
For everyone.
And COVID was challenging for us in our life in its own right. But this very, very dark, internal, painful, challenging situation was unrelated to that. And it's embarrassing. That's how I feel about it. When you go through something like that, you just want to withdraw because you feel it like it's an embarrassing thing. But when you look at it through this lens, that a dark night of the soul is a sacred rite of passage, it completely flips the lens through which you look at it. And all of a sudden, this experience that I went through, I no longer look at it with, this kind of like embarrassment, but I appreciate it and I respect it. And it becomes a beautiful thing, in fact. And Simon Haas, this wonderful person with his wonderful book, he does a really fantastic job of flushing this point out in detail and really helping you appreciate how important these critical junctures in our life are.
Wow. When you say rite of passage, it almost becomes something that we can expect. That everyone goes through it, and it's just like something that will happen at some point for sure. And when you come out the other side of it, you're more mature, more, you've grown, you've leveled up.
It's
very, it's quite reassuring, really.
It is, because it's inevitable in one sense that at some point we'll all face that rite of passage. And so it's encouraging, it's reassuring, especially if we try to be that person that wakes up, like the alarm clock analogy, and we really try to approach those moments, because those moments can take us further darker as well if we turn to the wrong things when times get tough, and we see that, and we see people who can get into very destructive cycles in their life. It's ignorant self-interest, not to call someone ignorant, but it's a misguided self-interest, and we can end up going darker and darker. But if we're able to start to take on this enlightened self-interest, and we're able to face these challenges and turn to the right people and turn to the right places to help us, like Krishna, like here Arjuna. In fact, the perfect place to turn in those moments is to the divine. That's the perfect opportunity. And we often see, at least I've seen it, that many people turn to a spiritual path because they've gone through something very, very difficult. And this is precisely why. It's the intelligent route when we go through something like that. And actually, Prabhupada, who again, he's the author of the book. We keep saying these names, and I just want to just say elaborate on who these people are, because some of the listeners may not know. But Srila Prabhupada, he wrote this version of the Bhagavad Gita. He talks about at the very beginning of the Gita. One of the things he talks about is the fact that we are by nature conditioned, and we're prone to make certain mistakes. And so Krishna, or God, is infallible. He's not conditioned by the 4 defects that we generally are we always are as humans. And so when we go through these challenging times, the perfect place to look is to Krishna, or to God, or to Allah, or to however you refer to as that divine person. We call him Krishna. Krishna just means all attractive. But that's the perfect place to look if we really want to understand enlightened self-interest.
Ultimately.
Deep stuff, huh?
So very, very deep.
Okay.
I think that's a good place to get some mantra meditation happening, don't you?
I think so. I think we did that time. So we like to finish out these podcasts with a little bit of Kirtan, seeing as this is Kirtan London. So normally me and Cintamani would be together, but Cintamani's not been feeling so well. In fact, well done, Cintamani. You got through this like a boss.
Still alive.
Yeah, but she wasn't feeling so well, so that's why we did this from our own separate homes today. So it's just me on the harmonium. Can you still hear me? I'm gonna try and turn the mic a little bit.
Yeah, try to stay close. Yeah.
Okay, let me just check one thing with the mic. One second. I have this nice professional mic, but I sometimes have to check the settings on it.
All good. Also, just so you know, if you want a copy of Bhagavad Gita, you can send a donation to Kirtan London, and then they will send you a copy.
Oh yeah, well, that's a good point, Cintamani. What else? Were there any other things that we should say as kind of announcements or things before we wrap up and finish? Because after the Kirtan, we can wrap up after that.
Yeah, I think that's it. Oh, we'll be back in 2 weeks.
Yeah. We do it on every 2nd and 4th Wednesday of the month, right?
At 7 p.m., not 7:30.
At 7 p.m. I was so scared. I was like, I'm going to have to do this all alone.
I was so chill because I thought I was on time, you see. Then I saw that I'd missed a call from you, and I panicked. I came on here without my notes. Anyway, long story, but yeah.
Don't worry, Cintamani. I'm so glad it was you, because it's normally me that does that kind of thing. Normally, I'm that guy. I'm that guy that's like, oh, damn it. So
How
I'm
does it
glad
feel?
because it's all good. It's all good. I'm glad you made it. I'm glad you were okay and you were happy and healthy and safe.
It's all
Okay,
good. Just thank you.
I'm going to sing the Maha Mantra. I think that's a nice way to finish today.
Sweet.
We might sing different mantras to outro this podcast, but I'm going to sing the Maha Mantra. So we have 10 people live with us still, which is very cool. So please do chant with me from your own home. We spoke about the power of sound vibration earlier. So these sound vibrations, these are sacred sound vibrations. These are sacred mantras that we chant in the Bhakti tradition. And so when we chant them, they uplift us. They uplift us both materially and spiritually. They have a profound effect. So I encourage you, chant with us if you're feeling it. Can you hear that?
Yep, sounds good. Kafarina's comment is great. I wish you could see it. But she says, I really enjoyed this organic conversation. Thank you for sharing the juicy wisdom bites. Just eat wisdom. Thanks, Tafrina, for being with us.
Thank you for engaging with us. It really helps.
Yeah, it's nice.
Here we go, a bit of chant. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I was thinking you were talking about the names Radha, Madhva and Govinda.
Mm.
So maybe I'll just sing Jai Radha Madhava to take us out.
Perfect.
Jaya Radha Madhava, Jaya Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava, Jaya Kunja Bihari, Jaya Gopi Janavallabha, Jaya Girivardhari, Yashodanandana Praja Janaranjana, Yashodanandana Praja Janaranjana, Jamuna Tira Vanachari, Jamuna Tira Vanachari, Jamuna Tira Vanachari, Jaya Radha Madhava, Jaya Kunja Bihari. Haribo.
Thank you. Thank you for singing Radha Madhava.
Yeah. I should have thought of it before, but whilst I was singing Maha Mantra, I was like, oh yeah, we were talking about Madhava. Okay.
Wonderful, wonderful.
That was nice.
Mhm.
So thank you so much to everyone who was with us here live. Thank you for engaging. It really was wonderful to see your comments coming in. And like we said earlier, we'll be doing this every second and fourth Wednesday of the month. And in fact, if you like Cintamani said, you can follow along with us. So today we discussed chapter 1 of the Bhagavad Gita. So next week, we'll be looking at chapter 2. So if you'd like to, you can also read chapter 2 before the next session, and you can come into the session with questions, or you can send us your questions already, and we can have them ready and prepared to talk about during the session. So it can be as interactive as you like, in fact. So I encourage you, if you feel like doing that, we can do this together. This is just myself and Cintamani trying to take our own knowledge and understanding of the Gita a little bit deeper, and then share that with all of you at the same time.
Yes. Thank
Any
you so
closing
much.
words, Cintamani?
I'm just happy. I hope everybody's happy too and feeling peaceful, and that you'll have a nice sleep now that you, well, not now, maybe in a few hours, now that you've heard some beautiful mantra. And yeah, thank you so much.
Beautiful. Thank you, Cintamani. And yeah, thank you, Divya. And thank you, Stephen and Tafrina and all of you. We will see you hopefully in the next one. Take care. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.